Hi there, and a very warm welcome to Season 6, Episode 16 of People Soup. It's Ross McIntosh here.
When you discover something that can help people to be human and to just navigate the challenges of being human, it isn't right, is it, that you keep that to yourself and that you guard it. I think that every ACT practitioner that I have met has been, so generous and so much part of this movement to share those techniques with other people.
Peace Supers. This week I chat with Hazel Anderson Turner. Hazel is a business psychologist and mindset coach specialising in resilience and leadership. She's also a podcast co-host at Coaching unpACT and author of the book Coaching Through Burnout. Hazel's People Soup ingredients are flexibility, values-led action, being of service with a healthy sprinkling of humour. You'll hear Hazel talk about her unusual career path, including what led her to leave one organisation. You'll also hear her talk about her work with leaders and dysfunctional teams, as well as her pioneering coaching work during the pandemic. For those of you who are new to People Soup, welcome. It's great to have you here. We aim to provide you with the ingredients for a better work life, from behavioural science and beyond. For those of you who are regular Pea Soupers, thanks for tuning in again. We love it that you're part of our community. A quick scoot over to the news desk. I have some new offerings in 2025. My small group supervision program for those of you using ACT in the workplace has launched. Thanks to Cohort 1 for a great first session. I'm also planning an open course where I deliver the training protocol I developed with Dr. Paul Flaxman to people who are interested in navigating their working lives more effectively, considering what matters and what might be getting in the way in terms of being the person they'd really like to be. More news on that soon. Finally, would anyone like a People Soup bookmark? My dad, Big G, is poised to send your bookmark anywhere in the world. All we need is your postal address. So let's crack on. For now, get a brew on and have a listen to the first part of my chat with Hazel Anderson Turner. Hazel Anderson Turner, welcome to People Soup.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, well, it's a delight to have you here and a delight to see you. Now, Hazel, you know I have a research department, and I'm going to share with you what they've discovered about you. And remember, they don't always get everything right. They've been on a winning streak recently, but just pin back your ears just in case there's any factual inaccuracies. So it says here, Hazel Anderson Turner is a business psychologist and mindset coach who specialises in resilience and leadership. Hazel has over 15 years of experience in organisational development and has worked with a range of service providers and large corporations, including Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service and Facebook. One of her proudest and most rewarding achievements to date has been leading a team of coaches providing resilience coaching to the NHS during the global pandemic. How are we doing so far?
Yeah, that's not bad.
Okay, good. Sounds promising. Hazel has degrees. She has a degree in management science, psychology, and a master's degree in occupational psychology. You like a bit of learning.
I do.
And just to reinforce that liking a bit of learning, Hazel also holds certificates in business and personal coaching, ACT, appreciative inquiry, action learning sets, and is a qualified mindfulness teacher, as well as having a qualification as a personal trainer and fitness instructor. Blimey, I'm just exhausted reading those. Tell me about the personal trainer and fitness instructor bit, Hazel.
Oh, I can't believe you spotted that. So I was really into well-being. So what was it? I was in my early 30s before I had my daughter, and I had this idea. I'd always wanted to start my own business. So I had my idea that because I loved exercise and running, and so I thought I would combine psychology with physical health and do a qualification in personal training so that I could do something that combined the two in a kind of practical way. And then I had my daughter and it all kind of went out the window. But yeah, I still love exercise and being outside, and yeah.
Well, I think anyone who follows you on the socials will notice that love of exercise, and serious love of exercise, folks. I noticed, I think it was a half marathon last year.
Oh, yeah. That was hideous. Absolutely. Honestly, I mean, anyone that knows Brighton...
I do indeed.
Yeah, the risk of getting, the wind on that day, isn't it? And it was late February, and I had obviously gone off too quickly, and then I hit that last 5K where you turn in Hove and just got hit by this wall of wind and rain. And honestly, all of the official photos are me crying, actually crying.
Oh.
So, yeah. And I did say never again. And then this year I've signed up for an ultra in July. But I've got it in my mind that it'll be a walk run, take a picnic, make an all day thing of it. This, it's just hours on your feet, isn't it? Rather than a race.
I like your reframing here. It gives us a glimpse into your skills as a coach. And I hear you about the seafront in Brighton. I used to live in Brighton and used to cycle along the coast to places like Worthing and all sorts around there. And there'll be times, I was thinking, gosh, I'm going so fast. I'm really improving as a cyclist. And then I would turn around to come home and it would be the wind. And I just used to grimace and keep repeating this mantra of, the wind is your friend. It's developing you.
Did that work?
No. No. I still was in great pain and anguish, but I usually made it home. There's more, Hazel. To top it all, Hazel is an author and we'll be discussing her book a bit later. And the book is called Coaching Through Burnout. Now, the research department, it's not so much research, but it's a confession from the research department, really, Hazel. They are obsessed with your dog, who I believe is called Luca, and if I've got this right, is a cock-a-doodle-poo.
He's a cockapoo, yeah.
Oh, is that my misunderstanding?
No, that the breeder that we bought him from is called... I think called cock-a-doodle-doo, but yeah.
So a because I'd never heard of a cock-a-doodle-poo, and I thought, oh gosh, right, I'll just write this down. But it's a cock-a-poo. Now, this is less research, but more of a plea, Hazel, because we were reflecting on this, and we thought, please can you take Luca to Crufts? I'm not sure if there is an adorable category, but I think he'd be pretty well fitted to that category. And also, what I would personally love to see is, when they're showing the dogs and the judges go, take your dog for a run round the circle. I can just picture you. I think you have the style capabilities to carry this off, where you're gently trotting round with Luca, looking fabulous. And that's just something I would love to see.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe we need a bit more training. I think anyone that's got a cockapoo knows that they like to do this strange rotation around you. So I think it would actually look like a bit of a dance because he's going round me. I'm passing the lead around the back. So, yeah, I mean, it could look very stylish.
Or maybe, if not Crufts, maybe Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah. I'm open.
But how is Luca?
I'm much better than when we first got him. I had totally forgotten about the puppy stage, and I thought this is going to be fine. I do a lot of work from home. My partner's, away quite a lot, but this will be fine. And yeah, it was just like having a baby again. And again, I chose a cockapoo, knowing that they were high energy and very playful. And and I'm surprised. How much attention he wants, but he's absolutely beautiful, and he's got a lovely temperament, but they're a lot of work
and worth it.
Yeah,
look at that face, look at him after his first haircut. Now, Hazel, I've talked a little bit about some of your achievements, your qualifications and your passions, but I wonder if you could start to expand on that a bit for us so we can get to know you a bit. I'm thinking maybe if you could give us maybe a couple of pivotal moments in your career to date where you've really paused to think where you're going to go next?
Now, I know that you and I are both very much into values and those points in our career where our values came a knocking. So before I get to that point, I have to tell you, my first job was in the Merchant Navy. Now, my partner finds this hilarious. thought it'd be the Merchant Navy. And after that, I went to clinical research, the logical step. And while I was there, and I was studying psychology on the side, and I had this moment where I was in clinical research because I wanted to make a difference. The company that I worked for was very finance focused. So we would get emails saying how much profit had been made, for the people who had shares in the company. And we were working, very long hours. And I'd emailed the HR department to say that I wanted to run a charity event for a charity related to the drug that I was working on. And I was told, no, we don't like forcing charity on our employees. And you have those moments going, I don't know if my values are really aligned with this organisation or maybe this line of work. And so that in that moment, I suddenly thought I need to go and do something else. And that's how I ended up in local government. I went to be a youth worker, and then to subsidise my income, I started working in the training department of adult services. And that was how I got into the whole kind of adult learning space. So at the time, again, you have these moments, don't you? I'd had the whole driving to work when I worked in clinical research, sitting in the car park crying, when you just feel like you're not in the right place, but you don't know where to go. And, my instinct was to try to be a youth worker. That didn't work out. But yeah, I found myself on a path that took me into a place, for me. So another one of my values is service. So to work within the public sector has always been something that has really appealed to me. And so that was kind of the step into that space.
I love to hear this sort of moment. Thank you for sharing it, when you were in the clinical research organisation and they declined your wish to raise some money. Was that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was probably the first time when, I've had a real flashing light, values light, when it was so obvious that what was important to me wasn't important to the organisation that I was working for. And it was enough to push me I actually resigned before I had a job to go to. It was so apparent to me that this wasn't where I was supposed to be. And I was in my 20s. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have children. So I could take that kind of step. But yes, I think there was obviously other things going on, but it was so clear to me. And that doesn't happen, I don't think, often. Often we're looking for those signs, aren't we? We want the big sign to say, this is where you're supposed to be, or this is where you're not supposed to be. And I think that's one of the only times in my life where I kind of remember it being that obvious.
And I sense a curiosity there as well. Would that be fair to say? You then went on to try youth work. Well, first of all, you started in the Merchant Navy. Can I ask what led you to that career?
So I left university and I knew I didn't want to go home, and I knew that I loved the sea. So me and my boyfriend at the time and I just picked Southampton. I didn't realise that Southampton didn't have any beaches. I just picked a city. It looked industrial. I thought, we can get, some jobs there. And that was the job that came up that really interested me. Again, it was in the training department. So there was something going on there, where I was like, oh, I'm interested in learning generally. But I got to work, with cadets. And
wow.
Yeah. And I got to go to Spain to go and see our fleet of ships. So yeah, it was.
Wow, wonderful! What a start!
Yeah.
And what else? Can you think of any other some of those key moments that really stick in your mind?
So I guess the other one is the one that your research team mentioned earlier, which was what happened during COVID for me. So I'd been running my business probably for 3 years. And most of the work that I was doing was associate work in leadership development. So I was known for someone that was really good with dysfunctional teams. So I'd get sent to different places to work with different teams. And I did a little bit of coaching and had started working with ACT and using it within like resilience training sessions. And when COVID hit in March 2020, I had a connection already with an NHS trust, and they said, would you be up for putting a team of coaches together to support our staff with resilience? And so I did, and then sat there in my cupboard and just did coaching session, one after another. And I mean, what kind of time. It was a difficult time, and it was difficult. I think it taught me a lot, I think, about emotional discomfort, and I'm sure we'll come on to that later. But holding that guilt, because I did feel really guilty, because I was there safe in a room, away from the most challenging places, but trying to support using my skills as best that I could. And I went from, like I say, probably defining myself more as a business psychologist and more as, someone that worked with teams and with leaders, to suddenly a coach, and a coach that used ACT as my primary approach. And suddenly as well, going from maybe 4 coaches a month to 4 a day or 6 a day, that's where I developed my proficiency, I guess. That's where I developed, I got so much practice because it was, again, one after the other. And that led me to then message Joe Oliver a couple of years later, who had trained me in ACT, and say, hey, there's definitely something in this using ACT for coaching. Why don't we start offering some training to other coaches? And then that led me to the group of trusts contacting me about burnout. So obviously this whole resilience thing was like, we're still not feeling very resilient. Everyone's exhausted. We're all, burnout is now the thing. And that's what then led me to get into that world of burnout, and to think, hey, there is a place for coaching here. There is a really strong place, not just for delivering professional coaching, but also for supporting people to develop their skills, that leader as coach type approach. There's definitely something in that. And then obviously that led me eventually to write the book.
Yeah, thank you. And I really see your values shine through that. This value, particularly this value for me, I'm seeing that of being of service for that extraordinary time. Just take a step back. You were talking a bit earlier about being known for your work with dysfunctional teams. How did you find that? I'm curious.
Well, I think the reason that I ended up getting into psychology, so obviously studying management science, the posh business studies, studying that first, and I just became fascinated by what happens to humans when you put them in teams in an organization. To me, it is fascinating, particularly when you put power in there. And so I think the reason why I was someone that became a bit known for that was because I was quite fearless around it, in the sense I think a lot of facilitators are quite scared by, if there's a strong leader who is having a big influence on the team, or you've got clashes in personality within the team. Whereas for me, I find it so interesting. And I think finding ways to find common ground and to support people to communicate. And again, I think we're back to values, but that piece around finding that human connection, because I think, so I haven't made this connection before, but I always was interested when I worked in adult services, and I did a lot of work around supporting care homes that specialised in dementia care. And I always found it fascinating that we were teaching compassion to people who were caring for people with dementia. And I was like, this is, how is this, how has this happened? Because I swear that you wouldn't go into that industry. You don't go into it for the money, do you? You go into that industry because you care about people and because you're compassionate. But something happens to people where the context that they're working in disconnects them for some reason, for some people, from being as compassionate as they could be. And so I think, learning about kind of what happens to humans in different contexts. Then when I was running my own business and looking at teams and looking at what happens to leaders and what happens to people within teams, it's the same kind of thing. I don't believe that people intentionally, go into a team to be disruptive or to fall out with people. There's just something around what happens to our humanness when we're put in groups and within particular contexts and when we're put under pressure. And I think probably my acceptance of humanness, that was probably the development of it. And probably, enabled me to let go of a lot of shoulds around and judgment, maybe.
I love the way you describe it as a disconnect. There can become a disconnect once adults start working together in a team. They can become disconnected from their own kind of humanity.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is about protection. So, when we're looking at burnout and one of the symptoms of burnout being cynicism and detachment, again, when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about when your values are actually hurting you because you're caring a lot and the caring is hurting. So understandably, you start to withdraw and you start to move back. And I think we see when people are in situations where they don't feel safe, we start to put up different barriers. We start to use survival mechanisms that have worked for us in different contexts previously, whether that's childhood, school, different organizations. So and I guess that's where the dysfunctional comes from, isn't it? We're into function, but we're into that place where it's this has worked for me before, and this is an instinctive way of me trying to keep myself safe. But how that plays out in teams is then, that's making someone else feel unsafe, and then they're doing their particular brand of dysfunction. And I just find it so fascinating.
Me too. I absolutely agree. And it really, the way you articulate it really resonates with me and my experience of many teams of adults. And I'm going to think of you from now on when I'm working with teams, thinking of Hazel the Fearless, because I think that's what we owe these teams, that fearlessness that we'll go to places and allow them to explore those places of discomfort. And if we can hold them there, I think that's a truly great gift we can give to a team.
And it's the safety bit as well, isn't it? So I think, and you'll know this as someone that, works a lot with teams, as you're developing your skill, it's like you have a sixth sense, don't you? Or you can kind of smell the fear and you make a decision about how safe that space is and where you're able to go and whether you want to open up the box or call out the elephant in the room. And you have to be brave enough to be prepared to be challenged. So there have definitely been times afterwards where the person that's commissioned the work for me has said, but I really wanted you to go there. Or, this had been the outcome that we'd really wanted from this. It's very easy to say that, isn't it? But when you're in the room and your responsibility is keeping those people safe and having the conversations that are right for that moment, you have to go with your judgment, and that comes over time. But you also have to be prepared to, I don't know, let the commissioner down in a way and say that wasn't right for now.
And if we can explain why perhaps we didn't go there because we felt it wasn't safe. With that, I agree with that sort of sixth sense that we're thinking this actually, if I do raise this thing now, it could cause more problems, actually.
And that big question, isn't it, that as coaches we hold all the time, who is this in service of? So if I ask this question, or if I pose this to the group, who is it in service? Is it in service to this team? Is it going to get them to the place that they need to go to. And I think that's why sometimes it frustrates me when people look at, those of us that work in training or facilitation, and it's kind of, oh, anybody can do that. But the skill is in what is happening below water, isn't it?
Goodness me, yes. It's people say it quite flippantly, don't they? Like reading the room. I think we develop skills which are still under development to read the room and notice those looks or those sort of micro behaviours. And then, as you say, we're making that choice in the moment of what do we do next, and just double checking who is this in the service of.
And I don't know about you, but I put quite clear boundaries in when we moved to doing much more, online. So there are certain things that I will do with groups online, and there are certain things I absolutely won't. And because I can't keep them safe, and I can't use as many of my spider senses as I would normally. And I think that's why it's a positive now that we're getting much more to a mixed model, aren't we? We're coming back into spaces together, which is really important. And when we're talking so much, isn't it, in group work, is about developing trust. Whatever I'm doing with that group, I've got in my mind that by the end of our time together, this group will have improved in trust in some way. And that's really hard when you're not physically in the same space.
Yeah, I hear you. And you talked about your interest in ACT and how you're part of the Joe Oliver contextual consulting stable, as we both are. And I love it that we're both there offering workplace-focused approaches to ACT. I think it's a lovely branch of his offering, and I think there's lots of curiosity from therapists and clinical psychologists in what we do. It's a joy to collaborate with him as well. When did you discover ACT, Hazel?
So it was at a BPS occupational psychology conference. So it must have been about a year after my daughter was born. I was escaping for the first time for a weekend away. I was and it was in Brighton again. I just keep coming back to Brighton. And I went to the bookshop. So I was supposed to be in a lecture, but I was just lured in by the psychology bookshop. And I picked up this book, which will be very familiar to you.
For those just listening to the audio, it's The Mindful and Effective Employee by my good friend Paul Flaxman, Frank Bond and Frederick Livheim. Yeah.
And I think, because obviously there's no big kind of ACT on the front of it, is there? It's very, this was about mindfulness in my mind. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. And took it home. It probably sat there for a few months, as these books do. And then, and one day I picked it up and I started reading it. And I had struggled with postnatal depression myself, and I'd had counselling, and I had a mindfulness teacher who I'd gone to see once a week, and she'd been really helpful. And when I read the book, it was like lots of things clicked into place, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting, and went Googling, and that's when I found contextual consulting and the courses. And so I started going along. I felt like a bit of an interloper, so I started going along with therapists and just learning it. I wasn't then thinking about integrating it into coaching. I think when I first went, it was just, I'm really interested in this and really interested for myself, and I think I was doing some resilience training. So I started to integrate it into the training that I was delivering, and I just got hooked. And I think this happens to a lot of people, doesn't it? So I went on every training course that I could find. I feel like I should have got one of those, the stamps, like in a cafe.
Yeah, like a frequent flyer.
Yeah. And I feel like I know other people have said about being evangelical about ACT, but it really did feel like it provided a framework for a lot of things that made sense to me. So I'd always been interested in Eastern philosophy and obviously the values piece without knowing it. And I guess, for me, I dabbled like in and out of religion. And again, I think it enabled me to define my own structure of, the values gave me that, okay, what is important to me? And then adding in this whole piece around thoughts, which was quite a new piece for me. And it it just made sense.
I love that. It just made sense. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt when I first discovered ACT. Blimey, it just makes sense. And I wish I'd discovered this decades ago.
Yeah. So at that time, I think I just started as a guest lecturer in work psychology at Winchester University. And I said, I have to teach this to students because, oh my gosh, I mean, I'd had a critical mind. I mean, it's still... it still has its moments. But I remember as a student, that was when it felt like life got particularly hard for me and my mind was particularly horrible to me. And it drove me to get those qualifications that you spoke about. But it was not a fun time. And so I started delivering ACT sessions to psychology students. And it's fascinating, isn't it? Because psychology students, you think, would have some awareness of those types of techniques, but it was real kind of like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah, it does feel like, and I guess, this, I know we're going to talk about the book later, but this drive to, join that ACT ethos of generosity. When you discover something that can help people to be human and to just navigate the challenges of being human, it isn't right, is it, that you keep that to yourself and that you guard it. I think that every ACT practitioner that I have met has been, so generous and so much part of this movement to share those techniques with other people.
Oh, that's lovely. It's a joy to hear you talk about that and the way you hold it and pass it on. Love it. Now, thinking back to Hazel at school and thinking from the position you are now, is there any advice you'd offer young Hazel in her school days?
Don't wear berets because people will beat you up. Oh dear. I think there is that thing of, I mean, it all felt quite serious. I mean, you've read the book, haven't you? So you know that academic achievement was the way that I got positive attention from my father. And it became something that I therefore held very tightly and became something that was very important to me. And I was unwell during my first degree and I ended up getting a 2-2, which was so devastating to me, so devastating. And I couldn't even go to my graduation. It was so painful. And I don't know actually if I would have gone on to do a psychology degree. It's kind of, I had to, to prove to myself that I wasn't that person. So I went on to do, another degree to make up for that one. What would I say to myself that would help? I'd like to give myself an ACT book to start off with. But I think like you're more than your grades. You're more than what you achieve and to go and play. So again, I enjoy study. So, but I became kind of very much about that. But I'm also, I painted when I was younger. I did a lot of painting and I think I could have gone that route. I could have gone to art college rather than doing A-levels, but that art wasn't seen as a proper subject. So so I went down the route. And I think that is hard for people, isn't it? When if you've got some kind of academic bent. So I loved maths, art and maths. And so it was obvious, I think, that I would go and, study and do the thing that would result in me getting paid potentially good money rather than the thing that was creative and a bit more risky. And it's interesting now because I've got a 9-year-old daughter and I'm actually worried that I'm not pushy enough. So I will go with what she wants. So she is also creative and I'm, I'm not pushing her to do extracurricular activities. It was fascinating. I mean, she's obviously already so much more sorted than me. But I remember, so she was playing tennis and I was saying, oh, you're quite good at tennis. Would you like some lessons? And she said, well, no, because Mummy, they're going to make me repeat the same thing over and over again. And I just want to play and I just want to enjoy it. You're like, oh, yeah, maybe if I'd had some of her essence, that she can see that. Whereas for me, it was like, oh, actually, I could get good at this. I could please someone. I could, yeah.
Wow. And I see that playfulness in your work and your writing now. Is that something you relate to when you hear me say that?
Yeah, and it's something that I have had to let myself open up to. And I think I did it cautiously over time. But the feedback that I started getting, particularly when I started talking about burnout, was that I bring lightness to heavy topics. And I think when I first started, doing any kind of training, I was I wanted to be seen as credible. And this will still happen. If I go into certain groups, I will close down a bit of that part of myself. But I think when I started working with the NHS and the people that I was working with, it was like they were hungry for the humanness, and they were hungry for the humour because, actually bringing in a bit of joy, making people laugh, it's all part of it, isn't it? Even when life is really, really tough, there is always something that can make you smile, or there's something that you can laugh about. I do a lot of work with the fire service, and again, well known for dealing with really, really horrific things, and also, using humour as a way to be okay. So I think I found my spaces where that style of bringing, I don't say bring your whole self, but you know what I mean, bringing more of the quirky ness in. Yeah,
absolutely get that. And I guess we know when to dial that up and dial it down a bit. We can use that sense we were describing earlier to do that. And maybe sometimes just testing the boundaries a bit.
Yeah, it's when you get the tumbleweed, isn't it? I did a session for head teachers a year ago, and I think I was being quite mindful about how much hazelness I brought into the sessions, and I was getting some, I don't know if it was curious faces or, that kind of like, who is this person? And amazingly, they all came back a year later. The feedback was, we liked this person who was able to be credible. Be in that space of saying, I know this stuff, I know what I'm talking about, and I also feel okay to share some of my messiness and some of my imperfection, and just to be with you in it. And I think that is something that to me is so important, because it makes me think of social identity theory, this whole like we rather than I. I'm not standing up in front of people saying I've got everything sorted and I am teaching you how to do it so that you can follow in my footsteps. I am saying I'm in it, in the mess, and maybe I've got a little bit of an idea how we can navigate this bit of it, and maybe that would be helpful to you. And I think when you share some of the funny stories and you share some of that humanness, that it makes other people feel safe to take their own masks off a little bit.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's very ACT consistent. If we can demonstrate we're experiencing the same human condition that everyone else is and not positioning ourselves on a pedestal, I think that's invaluable as a stance for us as we facilitate work with groups. Now, Hazel, I'm keen to get onto the book, but before I do, I want to ask you a traditional People Soup question, and that's about your song choice. And this is a song choice that would announce your arrival in a room, whether it's a real room or a virtual room. It's not forever. Maybe it's for the next few weeks. I wonder if you've got a song in mind and could let us know why you chose that song.
So, I am I am a Swiftie. I love Taylor Swift. I went to the Eras tour, the full kitted out, gold spangly. Yeah, it was amazing. One of the best days of my life. And so I chose I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. Now, the reason that I chose that was when I first heard it, it reminded me of pre-burnout Hazel, who, like I say, I had postnatal depression, and I would have these terrible thoughts and I would feel awful. And then I would rock up at work and I would be able to perform. And looking back, that was a really painful time for me, but I think I was really proud of this ability to perform, even though my heart was breaking at home. And then I thought about the way that Taylor, get into my love for Taylor now, how she uses music. So her songs are, it's about the way that she processes her emotions and how she works through the stuff that happens to her. And again, I was thinking, it doesn't have to be that way. She stood up on stage while she was going through heartbreak, and it wasn't that she stayed in that space. She's moved on. And I think it reminds me that so many of us, I would say the majority of us, are walking around with our hearts broken for different reasons. And we're doing it. We're doing the thing. We're doing the stuff that's important to us, even though, we're carrying around our own pain. And so I feel like I'm bringing the mood down. but it is, to me, it's that anthem of you can still do it with a broken heart. It's both things are available to you.
Thank you. And I think I'm not familiar with that particular song. I am a kind of peripheral Swiftie, I would say. I'm a fan, but obviously not as deep as you, although I'm looking and I can't see any friendship bracelets there, Hazel.
Not today, no.
Not today. That's it, folks. Part 1 of my chat with Hazel in the bag. But fear not. Hazel will be back next week to talk about her brilliant book, Coaching Through Burnout. You'll find the show notes for this episode at peoplesoup.captivate.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. If you liked this episode, I'd love it if you told us why. You can email at peoplesoup.pod@gmail.com. And there are some changes on the socials, Peace Soupers. I've stopped posting on Twitter because I no longer value the place it has become. And I've also retired my Facebook page for People Soup. I'm still posting on Instagram at people.soup, and I'm on LinkedIn too, as well as a new account on Blue Sky. Just search for my name. Now more than ever, you can help me reach more people with the special People Soup ingredients. Stuff that could really be useful for them. So please do share, subscribe, rate and review. Thanks to Andy Glenn for his spoon magic and Alex Engelberg for his vocals. But most of all, dear listener, thanks to you. Look after yourselves, Pea Soupers, and bye for now. They are obsessed with your dog, who I believe is called Luca, and if I've got this right, is a cock-a-doodle-poo.
He's a cockapoo, yeah.
Oh, is that my misunderstanding?
No, that the breeder that we bought him from is called, I think called Cock-a-doodle-doo.